welcome to Dose of Wonder. I'm Caitlin, your guide on this journey through mindfulness, mental health, grief, and personal growth. Each episode will dive into honest explorations and gentle reflections to help you find moments of calm, clarity, and a little bit of wonder too. So grab your favorite cozy spot, take a deep breath, and let's get started. So the title of the article I wrote that this podcast is based on was called How to Survive Grief. And it started by giving the answer of, you survive it by keeping going. You can't get over it, or really even move on from it. It'll always be there, but just change from day to day, or week to week, month to month, or even year to year. You can be with it, you can cope with it, and deal with it. You can live with it. There is this widely held belief, right, that grief is something that you get over, like catching a cold, or just being in a bad mood for a while. But what if I said it's not just inaccurate, but maybe even kind of harmful to how we actually deal with loss? Grief isn't something you get over, or even really move on from in that neat and tidy way. Instead, it's much more about keeping going and learning to be with it, and ultimately to live with it. It isn't some straight line. It's dynamic. It shifts. And importantly, this isn't just about those huge life-altering losses either. It's also how we navigate the grief of lost opportunities, maybe change in relationships, or even losing parts of our past selves. In the original article, I talked about having to put our sweet angelic Penny, a senior rescue dog we had for 2 years, asleep at the end of 2021. We had no idea how old she was because she was found on the streets of Puerto Vallarta and brought to us in Canada through a local rescue where we live. We'd just lost our previous dog of 15 years, 4 months before, and we were keeping our eyes on dogs to help fill the void that our border collie Bailey had left in our hearts. And then we found Penny, Pretzel, the rescue called her, and adopted her on November 5th, 2019. She had stubby, worn-down bottom canines and a hilarious mohawk that if you tried to flatten it down, she would shake her head and it would immediately pop back up again. And she also had 2 light patches on her shoulders that looked like where her wings would be because she really was an angel in fur. Mid-October 2021 was when we first noticed a very small lump on her side, and that small lump grew quickly. So we had it checked out and it was diagnosed as cancerous. So we did a biopsy and some other tests which confirmed it. And then 4 weeks later, we began chemotherapy treatment. It's been a bumpy ride, and she had a rare form of lymphoma, which was presenting uncommonly, of course, because Penny was not your normal dog. She'd chomp at the air and door frames and walls when she was excited. And when you pet her head and flattened down her mohawk, she immediately shook her head again so that it was standing upright. I loved her mohawk. My husband wasn't really a fan. And her tail was constantly wagging, nonstop, 24/7, unlike our border collie Bailey, who only cautiously waved his tail like a flag once in a while grudgingly meeting other dogs. Penny, with other dogs, was always like, "Hi, I'm Penny, can we be best friends?" So it was a roller coaster of emotions the final few weeks, with a few times leaving us wondering, should we let her go now? Even though we only had her for just over 2 years, she brought us so much joy and laughter and smiles, and helped us get through a large chunk of the pandemic. We sometimes called her our Pendemic dog. Get it? Pandemic, Penny. And we were so lucky and blessed to have had her in our lives, even for just the short time that we did. We gave her so much love and cuddles and walks and treats. We tried to play with toys with her, but she never seemed to understand the point. I guess there's not a lot of toys on the streets of Mexico, but she loved chasing sticks, even with her wonky back left leg that had been broken and healed weirdly at some point in her mysterious past. She'd grab the stick and then jump around in a way that reminded us of a lamb leaping in a field, so full of joy and happiness that you couldn't help but laugh and smile to see her. So even across different kinds of grief, whether it's for a person or losing a job or even a big life change, It's often these unique, quirky little details that help anchor that living with it process, more so than maybe the grand narratives of loss. When you go through something like the loss of a pet, or maybe even some kind of big life transition, there's an important question that gets raised. When is the time to let go? How do you navigate that decision, knowing it's probably one of the hardest ones you have to make? So how can people arrive at this incredibly difficult point? Well, there isn't one single perfect clear-cut moment, of course, especially with illnesses that have these ups and downs. It tends to be more of a cumulative understanding that the animal's quality of life has really significantly diminished, or that their body is just giving up. In Penny's case, on her last night, she really wasn't doing well, and we took her to the emergency hospital. And the next morning we got the news that she hadn't really improved, and it was her body letting us know that it was time. And this isn't getting over a challenge, is it? It's about being present with a really difficult reality, being present, even in those final painful moments. Penny's unique personality still shone through. And it isn't just about losing her actual life, but about losing those unique behaviors that made her her, losing that specific joy, that particular companionship. And the decision to say goodbye, even when it's the right time and the kindest thing, it's still an act of profound love. And you have to remember that a relationship doesn't actually end with death. It just transforms. And it stays a part of us. And again, this isn't about escaping the pain. It's about facing it head on and allowing that bond to continue, but just in a different form. So moving on to strategies now, for you listeners who might be struggling with that ongoing pain beyond just acknowledging that it's there. Because living with it absolutely doesn't mean that the pain just vanishes overnight, or ever completely. There are some practices that can be really helpful. Things like journaling, or maybe creating memorial spaces, sharing stories of the person or thing that you've lost, or even just engaging in activities that honor the lost loved one, a person or a pet. These actions aren't about getting over the grief. They're about actively engaging with it and allowing it to become part of your ongoing narrative, part of your story. So the grief isn't something you discard once the really intense pain lessens. It becomes like a thread woven into the ongoing story of that love. We don't get over Penny. We learn to live with the huge impact she had on our lives, keeping her memory alive in our hearts. So, thinking about all this, what does it all mean for you listening right now? Well, maybe it means rethinking how we view loss, not as some hurdle to clear and then just forget about, but as a part of life, something that shapes us. Penny's story, even though her time with us was relatively short, really illuminates that. Even a short period of really intense love and connection brings a form of grief that becomes a part of you. It's not something to be just discarded or moved past. And if we step back and look at the bigger picture, the really profound message here is that the love we share, like the love for Penny, even just over the 2 years, it creates this bond that doesn't just vanish into thin air. It transforms and stays with us, which I think raises a really important question for you, for everyone listening. Consider this. How might recognizing that you don't really get over grief, but instead you learn to live with it, how might that change the way you approach other kinds of loss in your own life, big ones, small ones? How might embracing the ongoing nature of grief actually allow for maybe a deeper and more authentic way of remembering and honoring what was lost, without feeling that constant pressure to simply move on? And that's it for this week's podcast. Next week, I'll be talking about some life musings from an article I wrote back in 2022 called "The World Sucks Right Now," which I think is still very relevant right now. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to live with a dose of wonder.
In the stillness we begin, with stories stitched in softer skin. A spark, a sigh, a breath of